Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another chat with Andy the Cabby on a Tuesday this time. Different day of the week for everybody, but it was the best fit for the occasion. We have a little bit of a problem in London. We have an individual in place with certain policies which are destroying the place. And the easiest solution to that is to have an election and enough people vote for another individual to remove him. I think that's the best way. Well, tonight, everybody, I have the pleasure of introducing somebody to you who I hope will just do that. So can I get everyone to say hello and welcome, hopefully, the future Mayor of London, Howard Cox. Here he is. Hello, Howard.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the honour of being on your show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for doing me the honour of agreeing to come on. It's absolutely great. I want to start off by saying I think you're actually the most highest profile person I've had on here so far. So it's a first time for me, and thank you ever so much for coming along. It's great. First of all, I want to go back a little bit. FairFuel UK. What were you doing before FairFuel UK, and what made you think, hang on a minute, I don't like this, and started campaigning? Where did it all start?
Well, it's quite a long story, but I'll try and bring it into a bit of a process. What happened was I was running a database publishing business and doing some small business consultancy. Okay. And I hate the word consultancy and things like that because they all know everything, though, these consultants. You see them all the time now. But what happened was that I was doing a consultancy project for a haulage company. And this haulage company had about 50 trucks and was going through a pretty bad time. And this was about 2010. Right. And I sat down with the MD, who was really worried his business was going to go under. And he had other aspirations. He wanted to stand as an MP, believe it or not. And he had other campaigning projects going on. And but I said, OK, let's go through this, because I like people to trade out of the problem rather than cutting costs. So which means, sacking staff and things. I didn't want that to happen. But anyway, the 50 trucks, I was looking at his balance sheet and a profit and loss. And there was a line that stuck out a mile, which was the cost of fuel he was spending. And it was something like 46% of his total costs was going in diesel. And I thought, hang on a second, okay, all right. And then I suddenly thought to myself, 70% of that was going to the government in tax.
Right.
So not only was this small business employing people and significantly, contributing to the exchequer in terms of national insurance, income tax, corporation tax, you name it, all those sort of things. He was also acting as an unpaid tax collector in terms of actually when he filled up all his trucks. And bear in mind, his trucks were doing about 8 miles to the gallon. These are, 25 or 40-ton trucks, rigids and articulated trucks. Anyway, I sat down and said, well, I didn't realise this is the amount of tax you're paying and those sort of things. So, I've been wanting to do something about this all, for years. And I'm a member of the Road Haulage Association. They every year send a letter at budget time and say, please cut fuel duty. And the exchequer, the chancellor usually just ignores it and says, we'll do what we want to do. And at the time, it was Gordon Brown, and he had a thing called a fuel price escalator. You may have heard of that. And the fuel price escalator consisted of that every budget and every spring statement, they will put up the fuel duty by inflation plus 1 or 2 pence. Mm-hmm. And I said, this is ridiculous. We've got to stop this. What can we do? So I managed to arrange for the RHA MD and the Freight Transport Association MD to come together. The FTA is now known as Logistics UK. They've changed their name. But I said, look, and they hated each other because they were competing for the same membership. And I said, this is ridiculous. I think we have the same aim in common. We've got to come together on this. And I said, one of the other things we've got to do is try and bring a motorist group together. And that was the RAC. So I got the RAC, the FTA, and the RHA, and a few other acronyms, businesses and corporations have got together as well. But they came together, and I managed to convince them to put some money into trying to actually convince the government we've got to get fuel duty. At the time, we were the highest tax motorists in the world. We're still not far off of that still now, but anyway, it would have been a lot worse. Really, what happened when we got them all together and we sat around the table, we had to do several things. We need to get a bit of people power. And at the time, David Cameron got in with George Osborne as the Chancellor Exchequer. And they were, he introduced it, David Cameron, a thing called an e-petition. And the e-petitions were the first time ever used. We were the first e-petition. If you got 100,000 people who backed it, you got a debate on the House of Commons floor.
Okay.
And we were the first ones to do it. And I did that by sitting for about 4 or 5 hours, 4 or 5 nights, with quite a serious, if it's about 3 or 4 bottles of claret every night, sitting down. And I played the social media game. And it was, then social media was actually quite, I wouldn't say easy to actually get people to follow you. But nowadays, I mean, everyone uses social media and e-petitions, to saving the one-legged locusts of,
absolutely.
Those sort of things. But we managed to get 100,000 people on board, and we got a bit of money from them in terms of donations. And we managed to put together an economic report that proved that increasing fuel duty would damage inflation, cost jobs, all those sorts of things that we all know now. The fiscal issues are regarding, we put up a tax, it's going to impact on all our lives. And, we did that. I also got a great MP on board, a guy called Robert Halfon MP, who is simply one of the nicest and best MPs you'll ever meet. Unfortunately, I've lost him a bit now because he's Minister of Education. He's number 2.
Okay.
But we're still great friends. And if anyone knows him, he's actually paraplegic. He's on crutches all the time. And what he's done is phenomenal. I've got nothing but highest regard for the man. And we became close friends, and he became Mr. FairfuelUK UK in Parliament. So he could ask questions on the back benches and all that sort of thing. To cut a long story short, we in 3 months after getting elected, the first budget, we got a penny cut in fuel duty. It was planned to go up by 4 pence.
Right.
So with the net effect is we got a 5p benefit. It went down by a penny. George Osborne was pretty peed off with the fact that he wasn't congratulated for that. But the one reason why no one saw the impact of that, because the pound got weaker at that point. And so the exchange, it's oil's priced in dollars. So that's what happened. So that's how it started. And we gradually built up followers, etc. And I decided to throw my whole weight into this sort of thing. So I gave up the consultancy, the business, etc., and put my whole effort into this. And 13 years later, here I am still running FairfuelUK. UK. And we've had since 2010, we've had a freeze in fuel duty. It's the longest freeze in any tax in the UK history. And in fact, we've got a 6p cut. We got a penny cut, as I say, in March 2011. We got in 2022, Rishi Sunak, that took 5p off.
Right.
But mainly because of the lockdown issues and the cost of what was happening around the world in terms of the energy problems, Ukraine, etc., etc. Even that we didn't see that really make a massive impact, because there's another aspect to it. It's not just tax. There's also the commercial side of it, whereby we get opportunistic profiteering. But that's how FairfuelUK UK started now, where we are now.
Right. I mean, I remember we spoke briefly about Craig McKinley before we went on air, and I saw on his Twitter feed that he pulled up a couple of wholesale prices of fuel being supplied to, the fuel stations. I think the figure was 1.07 a litre plus VAT. And then you stick the profit margin and all the other tax. That's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. I mean, I've been driving 25 years, and I remember way back then, 64p a litre. Could you believe that? That's unbelievable in this day and age. And I remember when we had the fuel protests where they said, if it hits £1 a litre, we're going to go nuts. We're going to blockade everything. Yeah. And, you look at what fuel costs now, and I dread to think what it would be if you didn't step in and provide a voice and say, enough, we don't want any of this. It'd be out of control.
You're absolutely right. And, it's halcyon days of 64. I mean, I go back even further. I was born in 1954. I started driving, in about 1971, I think I did. And
right.
that was in pound, shillings and pence we were filling up. You could, the old pound, you could fill up my old split-nose Morris Minor quite easily in those days. My mum's Austin Cambridge only took a couple of quid,
right.
Which is what the Venezuelans are paying for their petrol and diesel, by the way. Just thought I'd let you know. That really rubs it home, doesn't it?
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the profiteering is a serious one. We'll probably come on to the Competitions and Market Authority. They came out with a report yesterday, and I've been asked to comment, and I've written an editorial article for The Sun. I don't know when it's going in, but you got to understand what every single day a garage actually is notified how much they can sell their petrol and diesel from their wholesaler or their branded bosses, etc. And this is the important thing here now. Currently, diesel is 5p in wholesale terms less than petrol.
Yeah,
I'll repeat it. It's less than petrol, 5p. And yet,
right.
what we're paying at the pumps for diesel, 15 pence more.
Yeah, I've seen it 20 pence more a litre in some cases. It's daylight robbery.
You're dead right, Andy. And those are the sorts of things that this government has, and previous governments as well, have allowed the fuel supply chain to get away with. But I'm not blaming the small garages. I really am not. Most of them are tied to very tight contracts, and they can't get out of these things, and they're not allowed to price it unless they're told otherwise. And so there's a lot of issues there. So that's why I'm calling for a body called Pump Watch. And I've been campaigning for Pump Watch for 6 years. And even in the last 6-7 months, Jeremy Hunt has asked me to put together a paper on how would Pump Watch work. And we've got Ofcom, we've got Ofwat, we've got Ofgem. Why haven't we, for 37 million drivers, got some sort of consumer price protection at the pumps?
Yeah,
I'm all for competition. I'm all for people. I do believe you should be able to set your own prices, but not really taking the P out of everyone and ripping people off. And what we're seeing now is diesel is something like 20p higher than it should be, which means for an average family car, that's a tenner. And the tenner in this cost of living crisis is pretty important. And I'm sure your viewers and listeners, Andy, would recognise that every time we mention inflation, here's the inflation figures they come out with. The next sentence is, it's down to the pump prices, what's happened at the petrol pump. Either it goes up or goes down. It's usually something to do with that. And it's in the government's remit, and this is what gets me, is they are truly milking the driver dead. I mean, we're going to come on to other things I'm doing in a minute regarding the London mayoral election. But the thing is, you think of all the taxes, all the things that's involved. It's VED, for example. Some of those. I drive a hybrid, by the way, and because it was it's an expensive. It was an expensive hybrid, but I got it through leasing. I don't think I'm rich. I'm not. I'm broke. but I have to pay £450 VED. And yet what's coming out of the exhaust? Because VED was supposedly based on CO2 emissions. Coming out. And yeah, I'm paying that of money from a vehicle that is absolutely clean. And this is the stupidity of the whole aspect. I mean, and why I get really upset with the government's policy with drivers. As I repeat, there's 37 million drivers, and next year's a general election. And if they got all 37 million drivers on their side, do you imagine the government being in power for decades to come? But they don't get.
Of course they would. I mean, it's funny you talk about vehicle excise duty with your hybrid. I drive a Ford Tornado 9-seater minibus, and the guy I bought it from, he had a plan where he would buy a 3-year-old minibus, run it for 3 years, sell it, and get another one. Yeah. So my 2015 minibus, he went and bought a 2018 minibus with AdBlue, supposed to be more environmentally friendly, Euro 6 and all the rest. He pays a lot more road tax than I do every year. The system's nuts.
Oh, it is. It's completely. And then you ask yourself, what are they doing with the currently the 5th largest income to the Treasury comes from drivers.
Yeah.
So you're looking at 35 billion of fuel duty and VAT, and there's one that really riles with drivers. VAT is on the fuel duty as well.
Yeah,
double tax. It's so immoral. I actually tried to get the government about that. It's illegal, but apparently it's not. Okay. It's just immoral. You can tax a tax. I mean, where's that coming from? I mean, that sort of thing. And then there's the VAD. Then there's insurance premiums, insurance premium tax. It works out that drivers around about 50 billion a year comes from drivers. That's $1 billion a week. Right. You just think of that. And then when you're driving over those potholes, you wonder what they're doing with the bloody money, don't you?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I put a video out on this channel. I can't remember whether it was today or yesterday, about councils where people are going over potholes and getting damage and all sorts. There's about 90% of claims put in. They're refusing, saying nothing to do with us. It's all fine, not damaged enough. And they wonder why we're all getting up in arms. I mean, there's one thing I want to mention, going back to the fuel again. I have a Shell fuel card. So just pay for it weekly. And I get a text message at the beginning of every week telling me what I'm going to pay. And it's usually somewhere around 10 pence a litre cheaper than what it says on the pump. And it just tells me that alone, what the margin is they're playing with, how much movement there is between the wholesale and what they're selling it to Joe Public for.
Well, currently, the diesel profit per litre is around about 36 pence per litre.
Right.
That's the retail level. And you're looking at, so every single car that comes onto the forecourt that fills up with their 50 litres, you think, oh, here comes another, multiply it by 50 times 36. You're looking at just about 18 quid, something like that. There's 18 quid's worth of profit coming in. It's absurd. Only 10 years ago, they were making around about 10p. So it's gone up by, what was that, 260%. And that sort of money. Petrol is a bit less. It's about 18 pence per litre. But it's amazing why it is. But the worst thing about this is diesel is the commercial heartbeat of our economy. Everything in your garage show I'm looking at was once delivered on a lorry or something like that. It was. And that's the sort of thing that other countries in the world recognise. And one of the things I've put out for this Sun is the difference between petrol and diesel at the moment, as we said just now. If you work out against the wholesale price and the retail price, there's a 20 pence difference of diesel where it should be in compared to petrol. So diesel is priced over here 15 pence more than petrol. It sounds a bit complicated, but just remember that figure. Yet in Denmark, it's 26 pence lower,
right,
than petrol. Now we're in this. Denmark's what, about a couple of 100 miles away, or whatever it is. And we use the same people that supply the fuels in this world: the Shells, the Texacos, the BPs, the Essos, all those sorts of things that are coming through. And yet it never ceases to amaze me that the UK is the one that rips off drivers more than any other market in the world. When you see the US, you can get diesel for half the price, and you get petrol for about, I think it's about 60% less, that sort of thing. Yeah. And I said early on that Venezuela, the current price of diesel over there is 2 pence per litre. 2 pennies per litre.
Mad, isn't it?
Shall we all move?
I think America's price per gallon, isn't it, rather than per litre?
And it's a different sort of gallon as well. It's slightly different size to our gallon. But in litre terms, they are half the price of what we're paying. Right. There are some markets more expensive, like Hong Kong. That's partly because there's not much room for cars, and it's expensive to put a car on the roads over there. And some of Scandinavia is a bit more expensive. But consistently, from the 13 years I've been campaigning, diesel has been the highest priced here in the UK and the world.
I mean, I get, you mentioned you got a hybrid earlier. Because I have an operator's license with the local council to run a taxi firm. Yeah. I get sent surveys and different bits and pieces every now and again. And one I've had repeatedly is electric vehicles. What do I think of electric vehicles? It's like they're completely obsessed with it. They want to force you all down it. And I say, well, I probably drive 1,000 miles a week. I spend probably 250 to £300 a week on diesel. I don't, could you imagine me picking up the family from Heathrow, driving to Clackett Lane and say, oh, sorry, we've got to wait 40 minutes while I charge the car and then drive on? It's not going to happen. It's not there.
And there comes one of, I'm not just fighting on fuel duty anymore, and I'm fighting on a number of fronts. And one of the major ones, of course, is the 2030 ban.
Oh, yeah.
Scrapping new petrol and diesels. We've been forced into one mode of transport, electric vehicles. Now, let me just say this once and for all, that electric vehicles are fantastic. I've been around the Top Gear circuit. I understand that's being ripped up today from now on. I think they're not doing it anymore. But I've driven one of the top Teslas there, and when you put a throttle, you press the throttle and you go from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds silently. I'll tell you what, that is a hell of an experience. But they are impractical, and that particular car was about 160 grand, I think. We can all afford one of those, can't we? And the diesel and petrol, ban in 2030. We weren't asked, we weren't consulted, we've just been told, and we want to lead the world apparently. Whereas most of Europe are going for 2035 or 2040 for the ban, but we need to be 2030. That's only 6 years' time. And I'm afraid, it's not going to happen. The national grid can't take it, and there's lots of other reasons. I work very closely with the Alliance of British Drivers. You may have heard of them, and Motorcycle Action Group, and we put together a report. And in fact, there's a new one coming out very shortly. The cradle to grave comparison of emissions for an electric vehicle versus an internal combustion diesel petrol vehicle. And let me tell you now, there's not much difference. In fact, in most cases, the electric vehicle is worse because in production terms, it's massively intensive. You know about the lithium, where we get it from the mines, the slave labour, how much water is used and all that sort of thing. And then there's the danger of the thing. We're finding that electric batteries now cannot be stored, or electric vehicles can't be kept underground, and they can't be put on big P&O ships and things like that because they're a fire risk. And then there's the disposal of the electric vehicle itself, the battery. What happens to that in terms of the whole thing's a complete mess, and it's become a political ideal that really, I'm going to fight tooth and nail until I die to try and stop it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, and I'm sure many other people are as well. Well, one thing you say about your experience with an electric vehicle, I'll just tell you this way, but before we move on to the next topic, before my Tornado, I had an E-Class Mercedes, one of the older models, 3-litre V6 engine. So it moved. And I pulled up to a set of traffic lights one night, and I was aware there was an electric car next to me. We looked at each other, and I know we were thinking the same thing at 2 o'clock in the morning. He left me for dust. I didn't see him. Gone. Yeah. I've never seen anything accelerate so fast in all my life.
Well, there's no gears or anything. It's just direct drive straight to the tyres and things like that.
Absolutely.
But my attitude to this, I wrote a report because I'm also secretary to an all-party parliamentary group, which I may not be anymore because they might throw me out the Tories because I'm standing for Reform UK, but we'll come on to that. We wrote in the APPG report 7 recommendations, and 12 very senior ministers, including people like John Redwood, thought it was a brilliant report. But the first recommendation is allow clean fuel technology to evolve naturally without any bans or edicts or orders of what we can and can't drive. There's hydrogen that at the moment it's not practical yet, partly because it's expensive to produce, and at the moment in storage terms it's dangerous as well. Then there's e-fuels, there's synthetic fuels, and then there's fuel catalysts. There's fuel catalysts. There's one in the States which is a legal requirement in the state of Texas that they've ordered that all garages actually sell fuel with this catalyst. When you fill up, you get it. That reduces emissions by 50%, all of them, and also improves fuel consumption by 10%. It's a no-brainer. Why are we not doing it here?
Absolutely. We should be. So, that begs the question, why? Where is this headed? Or are they just behind the times? I don't know what the answer is.
I think your listeners and viewers will take on board this. We're in a funny state at the moment. We've been like it for probably the last 5 to 10 years, where a group of people, a vocal minority, who believe the world's coming to an end unless we get rid of petrol and diesel cars and unless we go back to the horse and cart and we all dress up in sackcloth and ashes. Those are the sorts of things we've got to put up with. I'm afraid these people have too much of the ear of the governments around the world. And we can talk about the World Economic Fund, the WHO, the IPCC people, all these sorts of things. Let me tell you now, yes, there is climate change, but there's no climate change crisis. And that's the important thing. Or every single driver wants to breathe clean air. We all want that. Yeah. But you don't do it by hitting people in the pocket.
Yeah. Well, you pay £12.50 a day to drive in parts of London, which are obviously going to expand, which we'll cover in a minute. And when I go to places like City Airport, which is a regular place that I travel to, it's probably because I live five minutes walk from the sea. I get this horrible metallic-y taste in my mouth when I drive in and out. And I think to myself, is this really working? Is it? I might just be more susceptible to it because of where I live and, the air I breathe here. But
yeah, Andy, you're very right to say that. But the point is, we're living longer. We're all living longer. We're all much healthier. We're all much wealthier. I could go through loads of statistics, which we haven't got time here. But what there is, even the Transport for London regarding the ULEZ issue, expanding it throughout to the M25, there's information which really upset Sadiq Khan. He said, the report said, there will be no demonstrable difference to the air quality you breathe if you introduce ULEZ. And yet he ignored that, like he ignored the public consultation agreement. But anyway, I do think, of course, there's only one person that's died, young kid died that says on a death certificate from air quality issues. And yet, repeatedly, Sadiq Khan dishonestly tells us it's 4,000 people die every year. It's a complete and utter lie.
Yeah, I have seen that. Well, let's move on to this, shall we? Before I do, I just want to acknowledge everybody that's joined us this evening. Welcome, everybody, to the Daily Chat with Andy the Gabby Cabby. We're here on a Tuesday evening instead of a Sunday with Howard Cox, who will be standing for, hopefully, replacing Sadiq Khan as the Mayor of London next year. I see him chuckling, but I've got this underneath the desk out of view, both fingers crossed. If you are just joining us, I hope you're finding this enjoyable and interesting. Please, from a YouTube point of view, can I ask if you can hit the like button? Because we've got 118 in the house at the moment, and we've got about half as many likes, and that really helps the algorithm. And, chats like this and people like Howard, we need to get this spread around everywhere as much as we can. The other thing I'd like to say as well is if anybody has got any questions that they'd like to ask Howard, please leave them in the chat, make a comment, and, we'll pick them up as we go towards the end. So thank you very much, everybody. Well, let's get on to the meat and bones of this, shall we? The Mayor of London. You've been asked to stand for the Mayor of London next year. What have you let yourself in for?
Well, Andy, I don't know. My wife and I have been sitting down. We still say every morning, what am I doing? But anyway, seriously, it's got to the stage. FairfuelUK UK has been apolitical. It always has been. There's loads of people that support all colours of the political spectrum from left to right. And I hate this left to right and where you sit and all that. It's all rubbish. Oh, yeah. I look at issues. I look at policies. What matters. The cost of living crisis is the top of the list at the moment in time. We've been obviously let down by all the lockdown issues that went on. That's another story, another issue. But the big thing at the moment is the cost of living crisis. And then, of course, where Margate is, I'm on the nearer to the south coast here. We've got the immigration issues. And I regularly see Nigel Farage walking down Canberra Sands with his camera, his box brownie, taking pictures of people. But yeah, why am I standing? It's simple. We've got about 1.7 million supporters now that have been built up since 2010, and something like 80% of them are relatively inactive. We just send a little newsletter to them, that's all. 20% are very active. But I've had thousands and thousands and thousands of people saying, could you take on Sadiq Khan? And what really triggered me was in the public consultation last year, the question was asked to people, to the public, what do you think? Do you support the expansion of ULEZ to the whole of Greater London? And obviously I don't. And I asked some of our supporters to email or go into that public consultation and put their opinions and their feelings into that consultation. About 5,000 did it in about 18 hours, and we just got it in time. Well, to cut a long story short, Mr. Sadiq Khan and Transport for London decided to just ignore those 5,000 and treat them as one vote because they said it's FairfuelUK. Yeah,
Right.
I mean that, and you think, hang on a second, and then already, even without the votes that were or the responses that came from Fairfuel UK supporters, 2 out of 3 Londoners didn't want it. So he not only manipulated the results, he ignored the result of the consultation itself and decided to go ahead, and on August the 29th, we're going to have ULEZ and all the cameras are going in. And hey, did you know that 6 months before the public consultation, he ordered thousands of cameras?
It was about 3,000, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. I think you got better data than I have. I knew it was thousands, but I didn't know. This is what we're dealing with: a dishonest mayor and that sort of thing. So I immediately, once the public consultation came out that he was going ahead with it, I wrote to Mark Harper, which is the transport minister. And I said, dear Mark, please, could you actually get this man removed for his dishonesty and manipulation of a public consultation agreement? Surely that must be, sacrosanct, that the guy can't stand in public office.
That's right.
Oh, Mark Harper responded, hello, Howard, I'm sorry. Afraid I don't have any control over him. Yes, he does. If he is doing something against the public interest and it's something that's totally and utterly almost tantamount being illegal, he can be removed. But they're not doing it. I went to see Keir Starmer. I sat with him, and he's quite a funny sort of guy, really. He put his hands around my throat and said, "You're a bane of our lives, actually, keeping fuel duty down." But at that point, he was actually supporting keeping fuel duty frozen in the budget that's gone by. But I said to Keir Starmer, "How can you actually have your proud Labour Party have a man that's doing what he's doing in London, who's a Labour politician, previously MP in Tooting, etc. How can you have that man doing what he's done? He's lied and he's manipulated the public consultation agreement to suit his own aims, and he's ignored the result." And Keir Starmer said, "Yes, but Howard, he does well for us in London." And I said, "Yes, but not in Greater London, my friend. The Bromleys of this world, the Croydons of the world, all those sorts of places, they won't be going for him at all. You're in for a severe kicking." And anyway, I'm very close to some of the Tory General Assembly members. You may have heard of names like Keith Prince, Susan Hall, who's no longer the leader of the Tory Assembly, but a good friend, Nick Russell, Sean Bailey, who stood last time. Those sorts of people. And I wouldn't say we're close, but we're on the same sort of wavelength regarding getting rid of Khan. And but unfortunately, they don't want ULEZ to go completely, and that's where my position is very clear. I'm standing to get rid of the whole of ULEZ, even the existing ones. It should go. We don't need it, because I commissioned a report with the Centre of Economic and Business Research, which costs a lot of money, but it's an independent economic set of gurus who came up with the fact that nearly £1 billion has been the cost of ULEZ to the economy of London. And and those are the sorts of things that I do. I do a lot of objective campaigning. I don't use super glue and stick myself to roads and things like that. I try and get MPs on side, grassroots people power, and use economic evidence. Those are the sorts of things that people like Extinction Rebellion can't use, because they won't get the response they want. So they do this just to pee us all off. So the reason why I'm standing is this: I can't sit by any longer and watch this man destroy a proud capital city, our proud town. And this is the other thing important to understand. What happens in London spreads to the rest of the UK. And I've got a lot of national support, about Fairfuel UK. And, places like Birmingham, Canterbury, Oxford, Cambridge, Bristol, Bath, now Aberdeen, I understand it, and Glasgow. Andy Burnham has stopped the ULEZ going in at the moment, but it's only temporary up in Manchester. But those are the sorts of things happening. I'm afraid someone has to make a stand. Now, it's going to be an uphill struggle. And I'm standing for Reform UK because they approached me and they've got some money to help me get in. As an independent, I wouldn't stand a chance. And if you lose your deposit for standing in the London Mayor position, it's £10,000. It's a lot of money. So I'm doing a lot of fundraising now. And anyone listening here now, please visit Fairfuel UK and donate some money. I'd love you to help. And I will fight like mad. I'm not letting this go, and I will, for the next 12 months, be campaigning hard to get rid of this. Well, he's fundamentally a lying politician.
There was a lady I saw earlier in the chat made a comment. She goes by the name of Factual Breakdown. I know her real identity, which obviously I won't say in public, but she lives in America, and she commented she will make a donation to your cause from America, so it could even be worldwide.
Thank you so much.
I mean, the thing with Khan and that ilk, somebody sent me an email and a comment, and they said, look up C40 cities. And I thought, okay, I'll look up C40 cities. And all of a sudden, you discover this big web of cities throughout the world, London being one, who all seem completely obsessed with the idea of getting rid of motor vehicles, making everybody walk and cycle. And I think at one point, I don't know whether he is anymore because I haven't checked lately, but Khan was actually the chairperson of this C40 city group. And then when you drill down a bit further, they've got a website with all this. You can get it on Google easily. One of the funders of this group is the British government. It's a big tangled web. I mean, from my point of view, I'm just a normal bloke, wife, 2 kids, drive a taxi, live in a 3-bed house in Margate. When I look at politicians, when I look at politics, all I see is people in suits who make statements about what they might do when they get into power. And seldom do they, or seldom do we get the impression. And I'm sitting here waiting for somebody with a bit of integrity, a bit of louse, and a bit of backbone to say, stop, we've had enough of this. Is that you? Can you really do this?
Well, put it this way, I'm not a politician. I listen to people. Public consultations, if there any public consultation I put out there, and I'm a great believer we should do a lot more of them on the key issues, I will listen and act on them. I may not agree with some of them. Who knows what happens, but I will act upon them. I certainly have backbone. I've stood up hard. I mean, I've had death threats. I've had dog feces shoved through my letterbox and all this sort of thing, wrapped up in cycle gloves in this sort of thing, because the cyclists really do love me. And that's the point. You see, you've driven in London, you know about London, and you know about half the major roads are now cycle lanes with hardly any cyclists in them. You know, I'm pro active cycling, all those sorts of things. I can't do it so much now because I've had a hip replacement, back operations, all that stuff. But I'm all for it. But that shouldn't dictate our road policy, and we shouldn't be told to get out of our vehicles, our cars. In the last 100 years, the biggest freedom of of travel has been the ability to get into our car and go anywhere we want. Yeah. And why should we be stopped doing that? And why should people being forced to get, do their Tesco's shopping on the back of a bicycle? All these sorts of things. And why should a plumber have to go down the underground to take all these tools and his ladder, which he's not allowed to? But those sorts of things, if they can't afford to do ULEZ. And the ULEZ thing is a complete and utter con. I can sort of sympathise with the congestion charge, but the congestion charge and all those things have been made worse in terms of congestion and strangling our street is because of cycle lanes, low traffic networks. Now we're talking about 15-minute zones and all these sorts of things are coming across. And we're being told what to do. And the big thing here, Andy, and to all your listeners, is we've never been asked, have we?
Never.
Never been consulted. And so in answer to your question, as if I become London Mayor, let's say when I become London Mayor, I will get rid of ULEZ completely. I will cut crime. I'll put triple the number of bobbies on the beat. Do you realise that only that 5% of bobbies are ever out on the street? 95% are in offices. They're sitting behind desks and that sort of thing. It wouldn't be a mass, incredible amount of investment and funding I'm asking for in this situation. And by the way, Sadiq Khan is responsible for £20 billion of money. He gets that from a precept, a council tax type thing, and from government injections, etc. And he's in massive debt. And the reason why he's going for these ULEZ things and everything, because he knows he can help pay off his debt. And what we need to do is to stop his vanity projects, like he wants to rename every underground station with a Muslim name underneath the English name. And that's costing £250,000.
And
But
things
we
like
don't-
Black Boy Lane and other areas. He wants to rename racist sounding roads. It's
Well, he wants to get through the statutes and things. We're all guilty of slavery and all the things we've done wrong. And there's another thing you should think about as well. It's very important to understand this. Public transport fares are going up again, and it's interesting. He's trying to get us out of the car, and he's also putting up public transport. And were you aware that in the underground, there's several sorts of pollution emissions that come out of vehicles and cars and engines and all sorts of things? Obviously, you've heard of NOx. That's what people talk about. You've heard of CO2 and all that sort of thing. But there's also a thing called particulates, and there's two types. There's a 10 micron one and a 2.5 micron. That's the little mini ones, which I have to say, if it gets inside your lungs, it's not healthy. It's not a good thing.
no.
But in the underground, particulates are something like 3,000% more prevalent than at roadside level.
Right.
Now, so why doesn't he put in big filtration units to clean up the underground? Many moons ago, I went onto the Moscow underground. I won't go there now, but I went to Moscow on business about 30 or 40 years ago. It's clean. They got these massive filtration air conditioning units. It's clean. You can smell the cleanliness. They even put little bits of perfume into the air and things like that. When you go and stand in an underground in this country, it's disgusting, and you're risking your health. But he doesn't say that, does he? He says,
No.
good old Mr. Joe driver and the taxi. I mean, I used black taxi cabs in London regularly, and every single taxi driver hates the man. I can assure you. But anyway, I'm doing it, and I want to do it, and I hope Richard Tice, who's leader of Reform UK, he took over from Nigel Farage, who's still sort of a notional chairman advisor. But they've got Anne Widdicombe, they've got Ben Habib, if you've heard of those sorts of people. Got Alex.
I have, yes.
All those players. There's a lot more, and yes, it's a small party. They've got about 9% of the popular vote across the country, according to YouGov at the moment. They don't expect to get a massive hit. They'd like to get 5 or 6 MPs in next time, and a London mayor. And you may have seen me driving around in a taxi with my big face on it.
I did see that. Yeah, the grand reveal. Yeah, it was a live with you and Richard, wasn't it?
Yes, we did.
Up in the taxi. Yeah, I did see that. I'll try and find a link for it, and I'll stick it in the description of this when we're done, so people can have a look. I just want to put something on the screen very quickly. Let me just find where I put it, just to put this into perspective. You and I will disappear just for a second, Howard, but we're still here. This is what the ULEZ area will look like from the 29th of August. This is what the proposal is. This is literally London in its entirety. And what concerns me about this is if you look at the M25 going around the outside of London as it does, there's certain points where the ULEZ zone gets very, very, very close to the edge of the M25, if not encroaches on it. So then when you look at a job like mine, taking people to the airports, you've got City Airport, which is in it already, Stansted, Luton. I mean, even Heathrow is well within the proposed expansion. And there's bloody great jumbo jets flying in and out of there every day. All right, they're more environmentally friendly. But I looked up on my booking system, and I sent an email to every customer that had booked a job with me on or after the 29th of August. And I said, you've been quoted this amount. I've got to warn you, if this happens, it's going to go up by 25 quid there and back. And, I've had one person complain about it, and one person said, aren't your vehicles ULEZ compliant? I said, no, they're not. And they've gone elsewhere. And that's just one small example with my business. There was a guy, I think he lived in Catford. He put his number plate for his vehicle, his work van, on his back, and he was going around all the streets on foot trying to trip all the ULEZ cameras off as a protest. And he's basically saying, I've lived and worked in London all my life, and if this happens, it's not worth walking out the front door. I mean, we have it with the fuel as well. I mean, as well as the ULEZ zone and congestion, there's all the little footholes and potential booby traps for drivers as well. I sent a driver into London to drop someone at a hotel. The name escapes me, but it's fairly near St. Paul's Cathedral. And he gets here, the hotel's that way, and the road bends round that way. This is a red route, and right outside of a hotel is a no-car zone. Imagine that. You drive up there in a taxi, and you want to drop their customers off outside their hotel, but they're not allowed. And he thought, what do I do? What do I do? So he decided to drop off outside the hotel, being the safest option. 130 quid fine in the post. That's all his profit gone. He was seething. I won't repeat the language that he said, but it was quite colourful.
But Andy, I mean, that's just one of thousands of examples I get regularly. There's a camper van guy. I think it might be in the paper today as well, one of the papers. But as soon as he comes off his driveway, it's £100 he's got to pay.
Mm.
It's and then you get the midwives. I mean, there's a midwife that I've known for a long, long time, and she's been a supporter of Fairfuel UK. She drives a little Peugeot little thing, which does about 80 miles to the gallon. Diesel. Has been happy, and it's about, I think it's something like about 12 years old, and she's happy. It's hardly touched the miles. It just goes up and down from Forest Hill to St Thomas's, and she does a night shift, so she's got paid two days. You know, and she said it's not worth it going. She said, you know, working out that just on the basis of the congestion charge and the ULEZ, she's going to be paying something like, for the sake of argument, 50 quid a day. Yeah, that, you know, for every shift she does. And she does 3 shifts, so that's 600 quid a week just to go to work. A month to go to work. This guy has sat down and not thought about this. And there's disabled people having the same problem. There's people, the charities, who can't afford to actually upgrade to ULEZ compliant vehicles. And watch this space. You watch him change the actual parameters of what qualifies as a ULEZ compliant vehicle. They move up. He did it when we around the North and South Circular, when it moved from the middle to the North and South Circular. They changed the goalposts then, and they're just devious. And this is why, and you can hear the passion in my voice, why I have decided to stand. And I wouldn't do it unless people have asked me to do it. And I'm very, very honoured to be asked. I'm humbled by the thousands of people saying, please do it. And as I say, I'm not a career politician like he is. And although so I'm there to have common sense policies, as I said, you know, one of the big issues, not only just cutting crime, and you know, bear in mind, 150 youngsters in his 10 years, twice, I think 8 years of him being mayor, 150 youngsters have died of stabbings. You know, this sort of thing. One person has died of emissions, by the way, but 150 stabbings. What's he doing about that? All that sort of thing. And you know, my daughter, for example. She lives in Orpington, and she's desperate to buy a property, etc. She's an HGV driver, and she earns about 40 grand a year. Like that, you think, great, she could do what? She can't get on the housing ladder at all. She's 32, 33, and he's missed all his housing targets for social housing. And there's massive amounts of brownfield sites. He can reduce the planning issues, obstacles. I've got a list of things of what we're going to do. And there's another one. You think of the 5G coverage across Greater London. It's appalling.
Yeah.
And you need it more than anyone when you're doing your communication, etc. And I want to try and get incentivize all of our Wi-Fi and broadband suppliers to actually get 5G up and running across the whole of the nation, particularly Greater London. That would actually help with youngster kids at night on the phone. You know, they're worried about someone following them or something. They can quickly pick up the phone and press. No, some people have only got 3G. Anyway, I can go on forever about that one. It's going to be 12 months of a hell of a fight.
I mean, going back to crime, I mean, it's something I feel quite strongly about. A member of my family was a police officer for nearly 30 years, not in the Met, down here where I live. And I grew up around it. I remember being told about things, seeing things, learning about things. And this particular generation of police officer, it wasn't only my family member. Well, it was my father. I'll admit who it was. It was my father.
That's lovely.
It was him and several of his colleagues all could see what was happening to the police force in general. I mean, one thing my father has often said is back in the day when he was a police officer, the brief was quite simple: prevent crime by any means necessary.
Yes, please.
And then it turned into something else. It was record crime after it's happened, statistical analysis, and all of this sort of thing. And him and his compatriots said, "Well, hang on. If you do this with the police force, if you take this and all of these things that they're saying, you roll forward to today, is true. All of it. You've said yourself, they're chained behind desks. They've got so much paperwork. I mean, I met a detective sergeant once who told me that they even had to fill a form in when they put handcuffs on someone.
Yes.
This is ludicrous. And you wonder why there's no police officers on the street. The Tories, they said, what was it? We've recruited 20,000 police officers. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. How many have retired before this alleged 20,000 have gone in? We're in the same boat we were. What can you do, or what do you suggest which will recruit us? I mean, we could go into, the corruption and all the news about wrongdoing with existing police officers. How the hell were these guys selected in the first place? It's a complete disaster area.
You're absolutely right. And I don't often mention this one, but I was the campaign manager for the first Police and Crime Commissioner for Kent, Anne Barnes. Okay. And you remember, right, she was a disaster. But I did get her elected, and that's in campaigning terms, and on the strength of much more visible policing. And I have to say to you, for about, I think it was just under a year, I worked with police, and that most of the police I spoke to wanted to get out on the street and solve crime and prevent it. And one of the things is they wanted to do is to talk to people more and engage with people, and like the good old fashioned days when, and I'm going back a long time, and you've heard the old adage, the thing about, I've got a clip round the ear for being rude to someone, and that sort of thing. And those are the sorts of things that people respect. Now, if you said anything to anyone like that, you're liable to face a lawyer who's saying, "Oh, you've offended me." And this is the SHIT that we're all putting up with at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to that day and age, I mentioned my father again. Hi, Dad. He's probably not watching. My mum's in the chat, by the way. I saw her name pop up there.
Hello, Mum.
Yeah. But my dad was ex-army, did 10 years in the army before he joined the police. And there was that breed of police officer, discipline, respect, duty-bound. I mean, my father was a police constable, never wanted to go any higher. He wanted to be out on the streets doing the job. And I can't remember the last time I saw a bobby on the beat. Can you?
No, not at all. And that's, I want to triple the number of bobbies on the beat. And I said to you earlier that about 5% are out in London at any one time. So I'm only going up to 15%. I'm still not getting the 100% out. And going back to what you're saying about little things like they had to fill a form in, when they cuff someone or that sort of thing. One of the things that I find strange is we've got incredible technology now. Why are they not using special? I have seen some people, but whether it's small mini pads and everything's on it, you just go click, 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 done, and that's sent to the office. They don't have to go into the office to fill a form in. It's all done, and they carry on their merry way.
I mean, a member of my family was assaulted, walking home, drunk one night, walked into a crowd of blokes, one turned round and plant. And this member of my family face planted the curb, lost 2 teeth and ended up in hospital. Knowing how things are, I went down to the scene of the incident the following morning and I looked for cameras, witnesses, materials, people to speak to, everything. And I got a whole list, and I even found a witness that saw the whole thing. Fantastic. I filed a police report, and then the police officer took statements and everything else. And do you know how long it was between that and when this individual was convicted? A year. And it was bureaucratic, purely bureaucratic. When I went and asked my father, back in your day, how quick would have all this been dealt with? He said it had been nicked and it had been in court the following day at the latest. Unbelievable. And it's all paperwork and bureaucracy again.
Well, I think we share the same, standards and ideals, and someone's got to stand up to him. if I don't win, I'm certainly going to give him a hell of a dusting over for the next 12 months. But I'm going to do my darndest, and I would welcome the support that everyone on here could give me.
Oh yeah, I mean you've got my support, and if there's anything I can do or anything to expose, you tell me and I'll do it.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
No problem. I mean, one thing you do mention, which we haven't really covered, is the housing situation. Yes. I mean, where do you sit with that? You mentioned your daughter.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important. There's two or three things, and one of the things I'm privileged to be now working with Richard Tyson. He's a property developer, so he knows a fair bit about it. And he actually made the point that one of the biggest obstacles is planning permission. There's this, but we're not talking about putting great big, 3,000 homes on the green belt. We're talking about putting thousands of homes on existing brownfield sites, which cannot be developed due to local planning regulation issues.
Right.
We just free up the obstacles, but obviously they've got to be built tastefully and properly. But they must be built so it's affordable. Every time I go past any building or housing estate, new ones being built, it's got luxury homes by it and all those sort of things. Starting price $500,000. My daughter can't afford that. We've got to have more homes around about 100, 150,000, flats and things like that. So, and give them 95% mortgages or even shared things like that. Much more of that across the whole of the capital, and it helps with employment and all those sorts of people will be close to work. They wouldn't have to travel so much in terms if they're closer to these areas. At the moment, they have to live outside because it's cheaper to live outside London. Not much, but it is cheaper, and they have to pay exorbitant transport costs to come in. And now they're going to be charged in terms of if they even a motorbike coming in is going to be having to pay ULEZ. So, in answer to your question, I'm very, very, very committed to try and get social housing moving quickly.
Okay, that's wonderful. I mean, in Margate, we have a fast link to London. I could go to Margate train station. I'll be at St Pancras an hour and a half later.
Fantastic.
And because of that, we've had a massive influx of Londoners coming down here.
Yeah.
They've bought their money, their families. They want better lives. They want to live by the sea. They've opened businesses, and a lot of them use the fast link to go to work in London. Yeah. And one of the things that's happened, property prices here have gone through the roof. I don't know whether that's directly responsible or not. But the house I live in, I've been here 10 years.
Yeah.
And the rent we pay isn't comparable at all to what we've got around us because of how long we've lived here. But 250 to 300,000 pound, most of these go for. And I looked at the basis of a mortgage on something like this. To pay what we pay for rent, I would have to put £40,000 down as a deposit over 25 years. And again, in 25 years, I'll be 70. Who would give a 45, nearly 50-year-old man a mortgage on that basis? It's quite late for a lot of people.
Well, let you tell me if next year, if I got elected, okay, I'll be 69, I'll be 70 next year. I've still got a mortgage.
Right.
Okay. Oh my, I had a bit of a problem in with my business. I was ripped off by a lot of money. I sold a business and I was ripped off a lot of money. And I won't go into the full detail, but that money I had ripped off of me was to pay off my mortgage, and I couldn't do it. So I've still got my mortgage, and fundamentally, there's lots of people like me and you, this sort of thing. We have to continue paying money and working. And these are the sorts of issues that people forget. I'm fortunate enough to be fit enough, vaguely, to continue going. My brain is very active, as you probably gathered. But the thing that really rankles with me, cutting across this whole interview, is the lack of democracy, the lack of consultation, all those sorts of things. I have voted Tory all my life, dearest damn it, as I said. The Tory party's left me. This is the problem we're having at the moment. And, I noticed today, I think in this Sky had listed all of the runners and riders for the London mayor election. And I'm put down as a far right-wing candidate. I'm not far right-wing.
No.
And it's annoyed me just because, and Reform UK, most of the people I speak to are common sense people. Anne Widdecombe, who used to be my MP where I live now, in the Maidstone in the Weald. And I've known her for years. And she's not far right wing, this whole thing. And that's why I'd like to trash all the labels of this and just talk about the policies and the issues and make sure you don't promise something you can't deliver.
Well, far right extremist and other words of that nature are generally used to describe someone that goes against the narrative, against the grain, to discredit. And as soon as you hear things like far right, far left, extremist, I switch off. I think,
too.
Shut up. you know.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting, Andy, because that's what Sadiq Khan called people like me. He actually said it. It's his London Assembly thing. People are objecting to the ULEZ expansion. I think he said he didn't actually say Nazi, but it was close to it. Far right, Tories, that sort of thing. He just said these labels, and I said no. The people that actually objected to the ULEZ expansion is people that see through your con trick. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. In that case, we're all guilty.
Yes.
Well, we're at the hour, Howard, and as I said to you while we're off air, I generally like to wrap up these things around the hour. That's about right. I want to thank you so much for coming on and joining me this evening. It's been absolutely great. As I said, I think you're the most high-profile person I've had on here so far, and I've really enjoyed chatting to you. I hope you've got something out of it as well.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it, my good friend, and I'll willingly come on again and see how it goes over the next 12 months.
Excellent. That's brilliant. To everybody in the chat, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I hope you've got something out of it too. Remember, if you haven't done so, please hit all the right buttons, the thumbs up and everything for YouTube, because that helps the algorithm spread this video out. You know, as much publicity as we can collectively get, Howard, the better. You know, that will help things, definitely. I'm going to put this on and share it on all my social media platforms. I'll put it on Twitter, Howard, and tag both of your accounts on there. I follow both of them. And, you know, anything we can do to help, we can. What I usually like to do with guests that I have on is offer you last words. You know, how would you like to end things?
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to like-minded people and, you know, common sense people. That's what I'm really chuffed to be here. And I hope I'll bring some common sense ideas tonight to you. And they're not unique, they're just common sense. And I repeat the word common sense again. You know, we've got to dump ULEZ, we've got to cut crime, and we've got to ditch Khan. So that's my last words.
That's common sense. That's the most common sense from the whole hour, definitely. Right, everybody, there will be more content out tomorrow morning as usual. This live stream will be there on the replay. Howard, if you could hang on just 1 minute or two after we finish, that'd be cool. And thanks again. Share this, comment. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, we didn't get to them really in the chat. I think we just flowed with it. Please email me, contact Howard, or leave a comment underneath. And if there's a list, I'll get them to him. And perhaps I can address this in a separate video later on. Thanks again, everybody. You've been great. Thank you for the support. And I'll see you tomorrow with more stuff. Toodaloo.